Good afternoon, everybody. If you could please bear with us for a couple of minutes. We'll just wait for the participants to count to go up before we start fully broadcasting. It'll just be a couple of minutes, so if you can just bear with us. We are up to 85 participants at the moment. We're expecting somewhere between 150 and 200 probably today. Panelists are ready to go, so just to introduce them to you. When David takes over and chairs the interview in a minute, we'll be asking them to tell you a little bit more about themselves, and then we'll go into the interview with Matt. So please bear with us for a couple more minutes. We're now up to 124 participants. Please use the chat to introduce yourselves to each other so we know who's online. Please use the Q&A if you want to post questions. I think we're probably getting close to being able to start. Most people are now online, so I'm going to pass over to you now, David, to introduce everybody.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Forward, editor of Public Sector Catering magazine, and welcome this afternoon to the third in our webinar series, The Future of Your Food Service. Today we're going to be looking at university catering, and we're doing this in association with the caterers, the University Caterers Organisation. I better get that right, hadn't I? TUCO. Universities, as you probably are well aware, are really up against it right now. There's a lockdown looming large over the higher education sector even now, and not least on the catering operations themselves. We're rapidly moving now towards what we hope will be the start of the new academic year in September. In a moment, we're going to play an interview that we've done with Matthew White, chair of TUCO, that we recorded earlier this week on Monday. That will be followed by a Q&A session with Matt and his three co-panelists, and that will be your chance to ask questions. The webinar was planned for an hour long, but due to the interest we've had in it, we are getting ready to run over by a few minutes if we need to. It would be great if you can stay with us if that happens, but if not, don't worry, because we will be recording the whole of the webinar and it will be uploaded onto the Public Sector Catering website on Monday. Okay, let's meet our panel as I ask them to introduce themselves, and we'll go first to Mike Haslin.
Hi everyone, I'm Mike Haslin. I'm the Chief Executive of the University Caterers Organisation, also known as TUCO.
Okay, thank you very much. And Alison?
Hi, I'm Alison Shedlock. I'm Head of Hospitality and Events at the University of Manchester.
Okay, and finally Callum.
Hi, Callum McLaughlin, University of Aberdeen and Head of Commercial Services.
Okay, some of us may still be a little bit new to webinars, and it might be a good idea just to sort of run through very briefly the way that they work best for us. Other than the four panelists and me, everyone else will be muted. If you want to get in touch during the webinar, there are two ways of doing it. One is through the Q&A function, and we encourage you to ask questions using that. You don't need to wait until after the video interview is over. You can post them at any time. But please keep it to questions rather than comments or statements so we can make the best use of our time available. The other way that you can get in touch, and we encourage you to do that too, is through the chat function. If you do that, please make sure that you use the to all panelists and attendees. Make sure you click on that so that everyone can see what you're doing. Unfortunately, if you do put a question into the chat function, we won't be able to answer it. And just before we run through the interview with Matt, and for the benefit of anyone who's joined us today who doesn't know who he is, I will just briefly introduce him. The Director of Catering, Hotel and Conferencing at the University of Reading. He's been chair of TUCO since 2016. He's responsible for membership and advising on TUCO's procurement services, which help public sector caterers save more than £15 million a year. Last year, he won the Caterers Award for the public sector. He's helped create the first master's degree course for public sector caterers, working with the London South Bank University. And he's also used his chairmanship to campaign for the charity Mary's Meals, which has ended up raising more than £100,000 in the process. And now, Andrew, please play the interview.
Hello, Matt, and I hope you're well.
I'm very well, thank you, David. I hope you are too.
Yeah, thank you. We'll kick off with a question that I think everyone wants to know, and that's really what the university scene is going to look like in September. I mean, will they even be open? What will halls of residence be like? Will student numbers be down? And if so, what sort of impact is that likely to mean for the way the catering works?
So, I mean, we're planning for a totally unknown at this moment in time, if I'm completely honest and transparent. The recruitment numbers across the piece are actually looking really quite strong. And talking to colleagues up and down the country, people are beginning to feel very positive about the idea that September will bring a sort of new line in the sand, if you like. I think particularly students themselves are incredibly excited to be going to university, and I think I'm probably right in saying, as I'm a little bit older than most of them, that they feel as though they're almost outside of all of this COVID-related stuff. As we know, the numbers of people affected in that age bracket have been really quite low, and therefore they're a bit invincible and are willing to just go and give this a try. I think the big worry for us as a sector is the international market. How many will actually make it to the UK in terms of the start of an academic year is a bit unknown to us at this moment in time. And so I think TUCO is particularly looking at more of a January, February start for a lot of those international students, because China, for example, at the moment are showing that they're not going to allow people out of the country until October. So an awful lot of universities are moving their teaching provision online, most of them to a blended provision, which is good news for us, the caterers, because obviously an online provision does not require food and drink on site. And therefore, going back to my original sort of statement of we're planning for the unknown, really what we're doing is making sure we've got all of the social distancing measures and what have you in place ready. But we suspect it's going to be a sort of slow burn in those first few weeks. But I think in terms of home students, as again I said earlier, I think we'll see a big influx of those students. Staff on campuses are obviously a big proportion of what we're talking about. You know, some universities have 6,000, 7,000 members of staff on site, and again form a very important part of our business model in terms of the catering for those people's needs. So I think, you know, life is going to be very, very different. We're looking at, you know, particularly in halls of residence, where we do cater for what we would term fully catered students, that they, you know, are going to have to still have an enjoyable experience, one that they want to engage in. And at the same time, we need to manage a group of people that are not particularly keen on rules and regulations, are very keen to get up close and personal. And it's going to be our job to ensure that we keep it fun, but at the same time very safe.
Okay. You touched on sort of online remote working, which I guess can work in sort of several different ways. That could be students actually working from home, or they could be on campus but in their halls, I guess, working that way. How do you see that having an impact on the catering? I mean, outside of universities, for instance, the lockdown provided opportunities for lots of people to do deliveries or collection rather than sitting down. Is that something you've been looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, technology, I think, is going to be at the forefront of everything that we're going to be able to deliver. I mean, at Reading alone, our campus population is about 18,500 students. We're not going to be able to get everybody through what are very restricted environments now in terms of the sort of quantum of people that we'll be able to house indoors. So click and collect technology is going to be absolutely vital. We're looking at technology around queuing to be able to virtually place yourself in a queue so that you're not physically stood out in our beautiful UK weather, waiting to go and pick up whatever it is you fancy for lunch or indeed dinner. So I think that the click and collect stuff is going to be absolutely key to the success of this. Takeaway is going to form a huge part again of what we're doing. And we've got to be innovative around that as well, because a burger in a box is not going to cut it for 31 weeks of the year whilst you're with us. And so we again are looking at things like packaging, trying to be again a little bit more exciting with what we're doing. So I don't know if it's an Oriental style meal, but you may well do something a bit quirky and put it in a sort of chow mein box with some chopsticks and a little bag of raw crackers or something, just to give that feel of a value for money concept, because of course our customers are paying customers. It may well form part of a package of accommodation or of their overall fees, but students are incredibly switched on to value for money, and it's going to be our job as the caterer to deliver that value still, albeit in a very different way.
Okay. I mean, just thinking about catering revenue in particular, you're obviously expecting it to be hit. Have you got any idea, has TUCO done any sort of work on how badly you might be hit and what that might mean for the food and drink offer you're able to provide to students, and possibly also the impact on any jobs that you have?
So, I mean, the kind of, again, I mean, I'm codicilling all of this with the word guess, because we really are guessing at this stage, but most people are forecasting for about a 50% reduction in terms of turnover. And obviously that impacts not only directly on us as businesses, but of course on the whole supply chain. And you touched there in your question, David, about jobs. The reality of this will be, again, going back to my previous point, the revenue drives everything for us, and if we can only service half of the customers, or indeed there is any need to reach out to those 50%, then I'm afraid that will have impacts in terms of job cuts. Again, most of the members that I'm talking to in regional meetings are talking about sort of resizing and reshaping of their institutions. There is a recent report that's just come out from the Southern Universities Management Services. We're talking about, being flight of foot here to ensure that the fittest survive, quite frankly. So, being on the front foot, thinking differently, trying to capture all of that spend that we possibly can is going to be key, because even, myself as a member of staff, thinking about my daily routine on campus, I would normally go and buy a cup of coffee mid-morning. I may well then pick up some lunch, and in the afternoon perhaps have a casual type meeting with a colleague and again be buying something. Now, if there aren't those places to have those social interactions and sort of collision spaces, if you like, we're going to have to create different ways of those things happening. Again, a lot of universities are talking about digital first being the answer for meetings. Part of my business model at Reading, again, is built on hospitality for meetings. Well, that's just suddenly gone out the window. So again, we need to create opportunities for things where we can actually then command a little bit of spend. I sound as though I'm, digging at everyone's purse, but really what I'm trying to do is ensure that the business survives. And I know I'm certainly not the only one in talking to our members again and again, time after time. We're finding people are coming up with these new solutions to try and meet people's needs, and again create a sense of coming back together. Because although this has been, you know, a new and innovative way of working, I think most of us are yearning for that sort of social interaction again, albeit at perhaps 1 metre plus, whatever plus means.
Right, okay. I mean, despite all of the problems that you've outlined there, is there a role for catering in helping universities to maximise their revenues? And if there is, what part can TUCO play in helping members to make the most of it?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is an absolute yes. I mean, what's been absolutely clear throughout this process is the massive reduction in income to universities from all of the commercial activities stopping. So, I mean, my department at the University of Reading, I mean, we're about £9 million behind in terms of revenue. And usually by the end of the financial year, we're creating a surplus, certainly in the low millions. Now, that revenue is going to be completely missing, and the university is obviously quite hungry to get its hands back on that kind of cash, because all of the surplus that we create, mostly I have to say through our external catering, so catering for, you know, events, conferences, meetings, those kind of things, that's where the surplus is created rather than the day-to-day on-campus student-led activity. Most people who operate a similar model to the one I do at Reading do that on a break-even basis, so that obviously the student and academic community actually benefit from those elements. But the surplus that comes in, you know, goes straight to the centre of the university and is used to provide other services back to students. So I think it's absolutely sort of mission critical for institutions to get that revenue back up and running, and to allow, if you like, those priorities that I spoke about earlier to be adjusted to ensure that we can drive those revenue streams.
Okay. You suggested earlier that if you take into account the overseas students, we might not be seeing a sort of return to what you might think of as normality until possibly January. Do you think at that point we will be looking at something that looks very much like it did pre-COVID-19, or will there be changes?
No, alas, I really don't think so. I mean, the other problem with universities, of course, is that it's a 3-year on average cycle. Sorry, couldn't spit my words out. So, you know, a student coming in to do an undergraduate program, usually there for 3 years. And so we're going to carry that deficit of students for 3 years, which will, of course, have an effect. I think, I mean, touched on the 1 metre rule earlier. I envisage seeing that around for a very long time. I don't see that going away very quickly. So that's going to impact particularly on the sort of bar and restaurant sides of things. I mean, at Reading, again, we buck the trend a little bit in terms of some of our other TUCO family, in that we have a huge bar operation still at Reading. We're a campus university. We're about 10-15 minutes walk into the town centre. And so people do tend to stay on campus, and we provide a very high street feel to those venues. Now, they're not going to look and feel, you know, like we left prior to March for a very, very long time, I suspect, because of the social distancing measures. And I think that people genuinely are going to be thinking a little bit differently in terms of the way that they do socialise, the way that they meet people. I could be wrong, because, again, I go back to my codicil of guessing. Students are a very robust bunch of people, but it will be incumbent upon us as the caterer to ensure that they are safe. You know, and I'm sure the law will enforce that as well. So I've just finished writing my draft, if you like, for the magazine for TUCO, the next edition. And I've said that, you know, as caterers, all of us across the whole of the public sector are kind of brought up, if you like, to never say no. We always find a solution. We always find a way to deliver. And I think, particularly TUCO caterers on this occasion are going to rise to the challenge and find some new, exciting ways of doing things.
Okay. You mentioned there bars and pubs and restaurants, and that's quite timely because this Saturday the government announced that we can start to see them opening. And I just wonder how, as a university, you're going to be taking the lessons that the high street is going to have to contend with to help you come September.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm particularly interested in finding out about is the business of registering to go into a pub or a restaurant. I mentioned before our audience is about 18,500 at Reading. Well, most of those come into some form of a touch point during the day within one of my venues. So this is going to be quite a big task, and I'm very keen to learn how the licensed on-trade gets its head around that, and that we don't end up with too many Mickey Mouses looking for a Donald Duck, et cetera, et cetera. Getting true ID out of people in a meaningful way is going to be really quite interesting. We're again trying to look at technology to do it. All of our students have what we call a campus card, which is in effect their front door key or their meal plan, that allows them to move around the campus. And if we can record in a sort of tap and go type way, then I think that'll be really quite effectual. But I think one of the other things we really need to focus on and learn from the on-trade and restaurant trade starting up this weekend is, how does that experience feel for people that they actually do want to continue to part with their hard-earned cash, and up the ante, because again, if time is a restraint as to how long you can actually be in a venue to allow the throughput for a venue to be commercially successful. I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't bear those table reservations when, you're told, well, you can have the table at 8 o'clock, but you must be gone by 9:15. That's always a bit of a killer to the atmosphere, and I suspect that that's the sort of thing that we're not really understanding yet of what the impacts are going to be. So we'll have to look and learn. But for sure, I mean, the one thing about our wonderful industry is, we're all great talkers, we all share information, and I'm sure we can learn from those that are going to kind of pioneer for us. Okay,
slight change of tack now. TUCO supports the PSC 100 Group pledge to reduce the amount of meat served by 20%. Can you tell us why you support that particular initiative?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's a no-brainer, I think, across TUCO. Again, in talking to our members about this, because this, potentially can be a very highly contentious subject. But for me, it's about buying better quality, and it's responding to customer demand. The demographic that we deal with typically in universities is that sort of 18 to 21, 2-ish bracket. And a lot of those people are eating a very flexitarian type diet. I mean, there's been lots of noise about veganism and vegetarianism and the rest. I think the truth of what we see is that it is a very flexible diet that people now eat, and particularly within that demographic. So we have to respond to their needs. We have to deliver the products that they want. So I'm not about cutting meat out. I'm more about using a great quality product and then enhancing it with things that allow us to make that reduction of 20%. But to be clear, I think it's really important that this campaign is about then using that money that's left over, if you like, to buy other great quality produce as well as meat. So, in this country, we have some of the best fish in the world. We have some of the greatest local farmed produce. And again, I mean, TUCO has done lots and lots of work about getting small and medium-sized enterprises onto its frameworks. So although we obviously are very pleased that we have some of the bigger players, it's very important for us as well to have smaller local suppliers and to be able to get as far into the food chain as we possibly can. Again, sorry to bang on about Reading, but one of the things we've done there is that we have a dairy herd There obviously are male calves that are born. They're not particularly helpful in a dairy herd. And so prior to us making a relationship with our own farm, that meat was being wasted. And now we brought that back into the food chain. So it's a very precious commodity, which we pay a premium for. It's a great quality product. But then we're able to enhance that with, I mean, I used the phrase toolbox that I wanted to share with our members to help them achieve this aspiration of 20% less. And that was to be able to provide things like recipes where we are putting in elements like mushrooms or lentils or something. For example, a lasagna. It doesn't have to be 100% beef, you know, it can be 80% beef, and then have that additional ingredient, something like some minced up mushrooms or some lentils. And actually the flavour profile is then enhanced as well, because the umami element that those ingredients bring to the meat can then actually enhance. And then hopefully we sell more. So the 20% is 20% less is not all about reducing spend on that product. It's about buying a better product and then hopefully selling more of it.
Okay. Looking at procurement more widely, I mean, this is something that's an important part of what TUCO does. How has the lockdown affected your work in this particular area?
Quite frankly, it's killed it. There is zero spend going through. The whole of the model of those frameworks obviously, you know, works on customer spend. So TUCO procures the frameworks by doing all of the tendering work, pulls together those particular frames for our members to be able to go in and pull down from those contracts. Usually by doing a bit of further competition work themselves so that they hone their shopping basket to get the absolute best value. With the closure of most campuses across the country, that has had a severe impact. Most of us have still got a few resident students, so at Reading we've got about 1,000 still living in our halls of residence, and normally we would have, you know, just short of 6,000. So there is a bit of spend going through on that front, but no, TUCO has been hurt quite badly through this period. Again, as an organisation, we've taken advantage of some of the government schemes and have, you know, ensured things like furlough has happened, because we're absolutely, again, about protecting jobs for tomorrow. Because we are, on the positive side, absolutely clear. We know we will pick up again. We will get through this. Luckily, TUCO is in a position to have been able to ride out the storm. And at the end of this, we will pick ourselves up. And Phoenix as a new organisation, and I think, you know, that's pretty key. I'm not talking about a major rebrand or anything sort of naff. I'm meaning that we're going to have to be incredibly agile. We've got to meet our customers' needs. And one of the great things we've seen through our partners, through our suppliers, is the innovation that they're showing us. They are making things COVID safe from sort of concept through to completion. And we're able then at TUCO to be able to feed those directly out to our members. So the webinars that we've been hosting for TUCO alone have had huge engagement with suppliers and framework partners, which has paid huge dividends again in terms of us being able to feed back into the supply chain of the sorts of things we're looking for, and equally them being able to tell us about the great solutions they've got. And of course, many of them work with the PS 100 group across the whole platform. So places like hospitals where they've already learned lots and lots from this COVID outbreak, and their supply chains coming into them and the types of food products that they need that are COVID safe. We're quite lucky in our neck of the woods, if you like, that we're not starting really until September. And there will be an awful lot of learning again from those other parts of the public sector. So, I mean, Andy Jones is always talking about us being, you know, a sort of giant family. And the reality is learning from those other cousins, if you like, is an invaluable gift to us, because we certainly are being able to pick up on things that have not worked and things that hopefully will sustain us to go forward.
Okay. A little bit of a sense of optimism from you there, despite all the problems. How do you see that optimism feeding into your vision of how you see university catering over the next sort of 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think that this is another massive opportunity for us, to be honest. I think that we have to do things differently, and that's never a bad thing. It allows you to get out of the bad habits that maybe you've fallen into. I think about some of the units that I have at Reading. You walk around them and you think, well, we've been doing that for a little while now. This is a real window of opportunity to just look at things in a new way. And also to capitalise, if you like, on some of that innovation that's going on with technology. Again, we look after a demographic that relies so heavily on the sort of digital world. And catering has not always been the first to embrace that. We are all about the people is one of the things we always talk about. But actually, the reality is going to have to be, no, we need to embrace that to keep things safe. But at the same time, that will allow us then to try doing things in a different way. And potentially there are some savings to be made as well, where we have used people, and we don't necessarily have to. Then again, I think that it's a way that you can find a new way of doing things. And I'm not talking about just axing people for the sake of it and replacing them with a screen. But I am thinking that, there are new ways of thinking, great efficiencies to be had, and some big savings as well. These machines don't tend to need pension schemes, and they don't tend to get sick that often. So we can rely on them to deliver catering to people and ensure that they're getting what they need when they need it. Because the other thing is, obviously, the working day, I think, is going to be extended, and people are going to demand services to be over a longer period of time, particularly again within the university sector. Because if you take the average lecture theatre, let's say it's 300 capacity normally. In the new sort of COVID world, we're probably talking that's about 40 people max. So they're going to have to stretch those facilities over a longer teaching day. And that means that the support services we provide are going to have to be there around that too. So if there are ways of doing things which beat an old-fashioned vending machine, if you like, as an interactive process, then we should do it. And we should take this as a positive challenge.
And that sets us up very nicely for the Q&A that will follow. Thank you very much, Matt.